Greetings from Tokyo, from the Asian Productivity Organization, and welcome again to another session of the Productivity Talk. Today, we are very honored that we are having a discussion on the post-COVID recovery, and we have the distinguished guest speakers. We will be discussing the case of Malaysia, and joining me for this session is Ambassador Dato Kennedy Jawan, who is the Malaysian Ambassador in Tokyo currently. And in addition to Ambassador Dato Kennedy, we also have a very special speaker, and that is the Dato Seri Muhammad Azmin Ali, the Senior Minister of MITI of Malaysia. So let me greet first Ambassador Dato. Dato, how are you? All is well with you, I hope?
Good, very fine, Your Excellency. We are doing very well here. Thank you very much for having us on board.
Yeah, thank you. So, Datu, let me start by inviting you to introduce the Senior Minister, and let's hear the message from the Senior Minister, and after that, we will proceed with you with your presentation. May I hand it over to you, Ambassador Dato Kennedy.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mokhtar, Secretary General of the APO. And firstly, I'd just like to say thank you to all our viewers for joining us in this session this afternoon. It is really a great honor for me to introduce the Honorable Dato Seri Azmin Ali, Senior Minister and Minister of International Trade and Industry of Malaysia, who will be sharing his insight, or rather his keynote address entitled Malaysia's Experience in Post-COVID-19 Recovery. For your information, the Honorable Minister is currently the Senior Minister, as I mentioned, MITI, and he was also the Minister of Economic Affairs in the previous administration. And prior to that, he was also the Chief Minister of the state of Selangor. Dato Seri Azmin has been in the political scenes for the last 3 decades, since 1999, and he is a graduate of the University of Minnesota, having a Bachelor's of Science in Economics and Mathematics, and as well as having a master's degree from the same university. Please let's welcome Dato Seri Azmin's keynote speech, please. Thank you.
It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the APO Top Talk aptly titled Malaysia's Experience, Economic Resilience and Business Continuity Measures to Recover from COVID-19. I must commend Malaysia Productivity Corporation, MPC, for its role in continuously driving the country's productivity enhancement for global competitiveness and innovation. In this regard, MPC's strategic relationship with APO in strengthening collaboration and networking has resulted in various programs being conducted to enhance productivity of the region, which has become even more critical during this COVID-19 pandemic. Today's talk will focus on Malaysia's experience in enhancing economic resilience and ensuring business continuity during the outbreak. As economies across the world bear the brunt of the pandemic and the unintended economic consequences of measures to counter it, Malaysia too has to face the very tough challenge of striking a balance between protecting lives as well as livelihoods. However, this is not a zero-sum battle. Health and lives are not bargaining chips that can be used to chalk up economic gains and material advantages. Both these ends must be pursued without compromising the other. In light of this, the Malaysian government, under the Honourable Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, took decisive and timely action to deal comprehensively with the outbreak. The government launched a systematic campaign Firstly, to introduce a holistic set of health measures and protocols in order to secure the well-being and lives of the people. At the same time, the government implemented various stimulus packages to help cushion off the economic repercussions of these measures and to sustain growth and ensure economic viability. A six-pronged approach, namely resolve, resilience, restart, recovery, revitalize and reform, was implemented. In respect of economic resilience, the government introduced a massive stimulus package worth 295 billion ringgit, consisting of economic stimulus package worth 10 billion ringgit, Prihatin economic stimulus package worth 250 billion ringgit, and Penjana economic recovery plan worth 35 billion ringgit. For Prihatin, 130 billion ringgit was channeled to sustain the people's welfare, 125 billion ringgit to support businesses including SMEs, and 5 billion ringgit to strengthen the economy. The government's immediate priority was to curb the spread of the COVID-19 virus, and towards this end, an allocation of 500 million ringgit was set aside to the Ministry of Health. To enhance Malaysia's health capabilities, the government allocated an additional 1 billion ringgit to purchase equipment and services to contain COVID-19, which included obtaining medical expertise from private healthcare services. As SMEs comprise more than 98% of businesses in the country, it was imperative that the government took decisive steps to assist them. 5 billion ringgit was allocated for SMEs under Bank Negara Malaysia Special Relief Facility. In addition, 1 billion ringgit was injected into the All Economic Sector Facility Fund. Among the major economic initiatives is the wage subsidy program amounting to 13.8 billion ringgit to assist employers in retaining their workers. This is a crucial move to prevent a tide of retrenchments, unpaid leave or wage cuts, and loss of income if employers were forced to scale down their operations and terminate workers. Thus, the government is subsidizing through the Social Security Organisation (SOCSO) from 600 ringgit to 1,200 ringgit per month to every employee earning less than 4,000 ringgit. This scheme is estimated to have benefited more than 4 million workers. At the same time, financial institutions offered a 6-month moratorium on repayment of loans estimated at 100 billion ringgit, benefiting the people and businesses. The loan deferments were granted since 1st April and provided further assistance to companies to continue operations or immediately resume business activities. Additionally, it provided a lifeline for individuals struggling to make ends meet, let alone pay up outstanding loan installments. We are now at the recovery phase, where we are rolling out strategic initiatives to propel the nation forward. Hence, on 5th June 2020, the government announced the 35 billion ringgit Penjana Economic Recovery Plan, comprising 40 initiatives with 3 main targets, namely to empower people, propel businesses, and stimulate the economy. Emphasis was given to providing additional support to workers and SMEs via training programs, financing schemes, pump priming domestic consumption, and assisting industries impacted by the Movement Control Order. To boost investors' confidence, a fund worth 1.2 billion ringgit was established to intensify the adoption of innovation and expand domestic venture capital. In line with the government's objective towards digital transformation, 100 million ringgit was allocated to establish the National Technology and Innovation Sandbox. In this regard, it is worth noting that the constraints encountered during the implementation of the MCO led to the wider use of digital technology among the business community. It is also noteworthy that MPC has been at the forefront, leveraging on digital platforms to undertake productivity enhancement initiatives for the nation. Malaysia will continue to deep dive into areas of sustainable development within the Asia-Pacific region towards regeneration of global competitiveness and innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, Malaysia has been proactive in the war against COVID-19, thanks to the commitment and unstinting support given by the healthcare workers as well as other frontliners such as the police, the armed forces, the civil defense, other agencies and volunteers. They have gone beyond the call of duty in carrying out their tasks, and we extend our heartfelt appreciation for their hard work, sacrifices, and invaluable contribution. Our eternal gratitude goes to the people who have given their total support to the government, faithfully complying with the standard operating procedures, health protocols, and MCOs. To conclude, I believe that the fight against this pandemic will be a long drawn battle, which will demand unrelenting commitment to put in our best efforts and work as a team regardless of geographical boundaries. Likewise, building economic resilience and business continuity measures will continue to be a major challenge for all of us. As Winston Churchill reminds us, success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Thank you.
Dato, I think that is a very informative information, and I think I would like to say that really the Malaysian government has invested a lot in what we call actually the economic, the financial stimuli, against for the recovery against this pandemic. And before I invite you, Dato Ambassador, I'm just reminded actually 2 days ago on the 29th that the Director General of the WHO, Dr. Tedros, also made a statement. And now, actually, I'm picking his timeline. By now, actually, we just passed the 6 months of the pandemic. Started when the WHO received the report about the what you call this cluster of diseases in China. But in that 6 months, the timeline is that 10 million people are infected and 500,000 actually have died. Yeah. And this is actually so much cost already in terms on the other side of the health. And but the message also from the WHO is that we have lost a lot, but we should not lose hope as well. So Dato, I would like now to invite you to share your insights, your perspective from your field as ambassador in Tokyo and in the realm of international cooperation, and especially from your position, what are you doing and what is Malaysia doing in relation to the COVID pandemic, including the containment and recovery. Please, Dato, for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. I think, of course, this year is a very challenging year for all of us. It is unprecedented, and the way we work, the way we live, we are now probably there's a need for us to embrace the new normal. But what I'm going to do is to share with our viewers here today is Malaysia's experience, perhaps under the following outlined. The first is the current situation in Malaysia, the COVID-19 situation, and how we approach this COVID-19 situation over the past six months or so. And of course, I'll be just touching a bit on the international collaborations that Malaysia has been dealing with other countries, and the collaborations that we have with Japan, and also the roles of the Embassy of Malaysia in Tokyo, and how we have been dealing with these issues for the last 6 or so months. And to begin with, let's look at the COVID-19 situation in Malaysia. I think the first case was first reported in late January 2020, and at that time we were looking at about 22 cases, of which 12 had travel history to some of the affected countries and region. And since yesterday, the authorities has confirmed that we have 8,640 cases, out of which 8,375 have recovered. This represents 90% recovery rate. But of course, there's a bit of a casualty, which is the figure is at 121. And as you know, as the case of COVID-19 becomes more and more detected in Malaysia, there was a need for the government to undertake various measures to try to contain or to cut off the change of spreading by enforcing the movement control order on 18th of March of early this year. This movement control was enforced under the Prevention and Control of Infectious Disease Act of 1988, and also the Police Act of 1967. The enforcement it took about four phases. Phase 1, which started from 18th to the 31st of March, and then was later extended until the 14th of April. And the third phase was then extended again until the 28th. And of course, the fourth phase was extended until the 3rd of May. The MCO, or rather the movement control order, included measures such as, we prohibit mass movement, gatherings, closing of house of worships, and even the business premises, the closure of all government and government's offices. Some have to work from home. Some have to do remotely because the government machinery still needs to function. And of course, the institutions of learning like the kindergarten, the government schools, the private schools, international schools, and all the public and private institutions of higher learnings were all prohibited during the period of time. However, there were some exceptions too, like some of the services that were considered essential: water, electricity, energy, financial, the banking. And these are some of the few services that were still open at the time. And of course, supermarkets were allowed, because of the need for the daily necessities. And of course, when we put this MCO in place, the border measures were also put in place. Malaysians were prohibited from traveling abroad, and those returning back to Malaysia were required to undergo a safe quarantine. I think of late, following the successful measures taken by the government, we move into phase 5, what we call the conditional movement control order, which was from the 4th of May until the 9th of June. And during this period, certain economic and social activities were allowed, except for maybe mass gathering. But Malaysians were also prohibited from traveling across states, across state border to their homes, unfortunately, during the Eid celebration during that time. And now we have moved to the next phase, which is the phase 6, what we call the recovery movement control order. And this will last until the 31st of August for this year. And since the phase 6, some of the major business sector have been allowed to resume, but of course they would need to adhere to all the SOPs and For example, the interstate travel is allowed. Government services are now operational, and training activities like sports, non-contact sports, and schools are beginning to be considered to be open. What do you call this? They're considering opening up schools now, and probably in the middle of this month. And religious activities now being allowed. But of course, all this will need to adhere to the necessary SOP that has been put in place by the government. And currently, as I mentioned, the confirmed case that we had is 8640, with death at 121 and a recovery rate of 97%. And of course, the border control measures are currently still in place, and with exceptions of those who wants to travel to Malaysia would need to be under a certain category, meaning to say that diplomats or dependents they are allowed, but with permissions. Residents, those who are holders of what we call Malaysia My Second Home programs. And shall we move on to the next slide, please? And in terms of dealing with the COVID-19, there were a number of measures that has been undertaken by the government. I think the first one was of course the need agency that coordinates all the responses to COVID-19. This agency is under the Prime Minister's department and is chaired by the Prime Minister himself at times. And the second approach is that at every ministry, the relevant ministries, they have their own ministerial task force, and this task force are also part of the national task force that is led by the National Security Council. As the COVID-19 is a health matter, is a health issue, the Ministry of Health was tasked to spearhead some of the key measures that form the responses to this pandemic. For example, the National Crisis Preparedness and Response Center is one of the National Command Control and Coordination Center, which was established during the 9th Malaysia Plan that was between the year 2006 to 2010. And all the national activities at the national level are being coordinated by the CPRC. And of course, the Ministry of Health, being the lead agency, takes the lead in screening, investigations, and doing all the contact tracing of COVID-19 cases in Malaysia. Like, for example, when the first case was detected in Malaysia, they were the front line to do all the testing, the investigations, the tracing the route, and probably also to identify the patient zero or the source of infections. One of the other approach that we have put in place is that Malaysia has also developed a contract tracing application, which is called My Sejahtera. This is an application that is developed to assist in managing the COVID-19 outbreak. It allows some of the users to perform health self-assessment on themselves and on their families, and they can also monitor the health progress, and also helps the authorities to monitor some of the health conditions and to take remedial or immediate actions in providing treatments if so required. And the other efforts that is been undertaken by our Ministry of Health would include the provisions of providing optimized care and also increase laboratory capacity for COVID-19 testing. I think currently the COVID-19 testing in almost more than 43 labs is that we can do more than 30,000 tests per day. I think this is quite a laudable number in terms of the capacity that has been developed by the authorities. And also in addressing the spread of these infections, quarantine centers were set up throughout the countries using government facilities and also hotels at times. And health clinics were also modified and to provide spaces for patients. And in terms of hospitals, it was estimated that more than 118 were able to provide COVID-19 screening throughout the country in May of the past month. And in fact, some of the workers, volunteers, in fact, have also come in to join to support the COVID-19 health and medical support authorities to combat this pandemic. And of course, as part of our approach, the form of communications to the public is very important. And almost on a daily basis, the senior minister is the Honorable Minister of Ismail Sabri was on TV on a daily basis to provide the current situations and provide advisories to the public. And of course, on the other hand, the Director General of the Ministry of Health was always having his daily press briefing to provide the updates to the public. And in addition to this, they were also communicated to the social medias. For example, Facebook, we have a COVID website by the Ministry of Health, the Telegram channels to disseminate many of this information. And as we recover and as we move forward, and the need to look beyond the post-COVID, the standard operating procedure for the reopening of the economy has now been put in place. And of course, the SOP is the need for us to be in compliance to ensure that all these standards are being adhered to when business entities open up their economy. And if you look at the slides, you see the Sabah and Sarawak at the site of that. For these two states, the state governments have also established their respective disaster management committee to address this COVID-19 situation in the state, which is in line with the measures set by the Ministry of Health. Both states have also introduced the contact tracing applications, which is Sabah Trace and COVID Trace. But this is dedicated to those traveling to Sabah and Sarawak, respectively. And with regard to our collaborations, next slide, please. Internationally, I'll just look at the short through these three outline. One is the bilateral platform that we have, the regional platform, which is through ASEAN, the OIC, and of course the APO. And of course also through the multilateral platform that we have been engaging with the WHO, APEC, and the 8. And on the bilateral platform, our minister, the Honorable Dato Seri Hishamuddin, has been very active from day one. He's been engaging with many of his colleagues from various nations like Saudi Arabia, from China, Singapore, Japan included, Pakistan, and many more. And normally, most of these discussions would center on the discussions of how we can collaborate in terms of fighting this pandemic together bilaterally. And of course, in terms of the bilateral engagement, you will see that in the early part of the year, there was a medical team from the People's Republic of China who went to Malaysia as well. This was to share some of the best practices and to share experience between the two nations. And of course, we do have collaborations also with the South Korean government as well. And on the next slide, on the ASEAN platform, there are a lot of engagements between officials, but I thought I would just highlight some of these recent meetings that took place, in particular the 36th ASEAN Summit, which was convened on the 26th of June under the theme of Cohesive and Responsive ASEAN in 2020. And I think perhaps some of you might have heard that the summit announced the establishment of the COVID-19 ASEAN Response Fund and the ASEAN Regional Reserve of Medical Supplies and Equipment, this SOP for public health emergency responses, and also the development of a framework to move forward ASEAN's comprehensive effort to recover from the impact of the COVID-19. And also at this platform, Malaysia has also called on ASEAN governments to start looking at the possibility of establishing the travel bubble between member states, categorized as low risk or green with regard to COVID-19 infections. And we have been beginning to look at discussing with some of our neighbors like Singapore and Brunei to create some of the green lanes for this particular travel bubble. And of course, the earlier meeting of the Special ASEAN and ASEAN Plus 3 Summit, which was held in April this year, there was also the proposal to look at the possibility of establishing an ASEAN Center for Public Health Emergencies and Emerging Disease. I believe this is still been under the feasibility studies, and it is probably an ongoing project. And as regards to the OIC, we do have engagements with the OIC as well. Statements have been made together to see how OIC member countries can collaborate in terms of addressing this COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, thank you to the Asian Productivity Organizations. Thank you for having us on this platform. This is also part of our engagement to see how we can mutually collaborate, how we can cooperate in sharing of information and knowledge, and how it can benefit all of us in terms of addressing this pandemic. And on the multilateral platform, we have been engaging with the WHO. I think the last virtual session was in March with the Director General himself, with the Director General of the WHO. In fact, I think the WHO has also announced a large global trial, what they call its solidarity. It has chosen Malaysia as one of the countries to participate in the joint research to test an antiviral drug. I think it's remdesivir as a possible medicine to treat COVID-19 patients. And on the D8, there was also a virtual roundtable, and this is also partly our engagement to enhance collaborations and to identify some of the constraints and to share some of the best practices. And last but not least, on the multilateral platform, we have the APEC also as well, the APEC Health Working Group, and this is also a platform where there were a lot of discussions on the on how to address our strategies and managements so that it can be shared upon or shared by all the member countries. And last but not least, on the collaborations with our host government here, with Japan, where I'm at. Let me just begin by saying that the two foreign ministers had an engagement through their video conferencing in May, and both sides discussed collaborations and how both sides can help to support one another in terms of addressing this pandemic. Of course, the one of the collaborations that the Japanese government has initiated is to provide some of the financial assistance for Malaysia to acquire some of the medical equipment, such as the risk, risk communication and community engagement, through also the programs that is initiated by them to go through the UNICEF and also the UNHCR. And the Japanese government has also been looking into providing Avigan, the drug, for clinical research, but this is provided through the UNOPS, and the MC in Kuala Lumpur is coordinating with our relevant agencies in Malaysia. And of course, we understand that the Japanese is also looking at providing some of the what they call this emergency packages assistance, like medical supplies, medical supplies, X-rays, CTs. But this is still under consultation between the two governments. And on next slide, please. On the last part, what we have done since the pandemic outbreak back in early or late December and early January, we know that this pandemic has put us in a very unprecedented and challenging times. I think for the MC, it has changed the norm of how we do or how we conduct diplomacy. One, I think when we deal with the role with the Malaysians here, it is very important for us to be in communication with the Japanese government and for the necessary assistance and cooperation from time to time. If you recall, the early part of January, there were quite a number of foreign nationals who were stuck on the Diamond Princess in Yokohama. And Malaysia is no exceptions. We have some of our nationals who were there, and there was a need for us to play the role of a communicator, the need for us to be engaging with our host government to ensure that we get timely information so that we can assist our own citizens aboard that Diamond Princess. And as far as the ASEAN group in Tokyo is concerned, we have 10 all the ASEAN embassies are in Tokyo here, are represented. We do have our regular meetings. Unfortunately, we have not been able to meet physically, but we do manage to have our virtual meeting. And this was the occasion for us to plan and to strategize ourselves how we can collaborate with the Japanese government, or how we can collaborate among ourselves to ensure that informations that we do are also beneficial for our home state. And indeed, of course, we are looking at engaging directly with the foreign minister of Japan, and to see how we can move forward collaborations in terms of ASEAN and Japan together in terms of addressing this pandemic. And as far as the Malaysians are concerned here, the embassy has been putting on many hats. We have at one time become a travel agent, we have become a counselor, we have become a parent. These are all necessary because there are so many queries, there are so many necessities for us to answer and to ensure and to allay the fears of Malaysians who are being caught in this unprecedented time. And at times, of course, we need to look at sending them home. How do we bring them back? There's a need for us to reschedule that. We have become, like I said, we have become a travel agent at times by rescheduling their flights, by looking at airlines that do operate. As you know, most of the airlines have now cut down their international routes by more than 70 or 80%. And of course, I think one of the things that we can do as the embassy for our nationals here is to provide them with some of the face masks that was difficult to obtain at the early stage, and which I'm quite certain they're very grateful for that. And on that note, I think I should stop here. If there's any query, Secretary General, and thank you very much for our viewers. And as a conclusion, we look forward to how we can move forward with all the countries having a lot of entry restrictions. We will be looking at opening up, looking at the travel bubble, and we'll be looking at how we can move bilaterally with Japan or ASEAN as a whole group through the ACT with Japan here as well. And on that, thank you again, the Secretary General, for your time, and thank you to our viewers for your indulgence in listening to my to my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dato. Thank you for the very insightful presentation, and you cover actually a number of areas, including the domestic, the way you manage basically the pandemic. And here, I think my comment is that I see clarity in the direction that Malaysia has to go in the vision as encapsulated in the six-pronged strategy. You are now in the recovery stage, and you still have to go revitalize and reform after this. But also another, I think, a very, very important point that you shared with us is clearly the coordination. There's a very clear also lead agency, yeah, and then how you are coordinating among the various agencies and ministries. And I think with all this, you have a very admirable record of what to call this success in controlling the pandemic. I think you are already only one digit, is it now? By now,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes,
Because
correct. Yeah, sorry. In fact, yesterday we consider as a 0 digit as of July, but there was only one case which was imported. It was not locally. It was not a local infection yesterday, 1st of July. So we consider as a 0 digit yesterday.
yeah, and I think the other be that in APO member countries or the ASEAN, our situation still varies. There are some countries that are already like Malaysia in terms of zero, managing the spread. But there are also countries that are still having very high rate of spread of infection. And therefore, I think we really need to learn from one another, basically, on this. And so before I continue, Dato, let me also express and put for the record our thanks and appreciation to the friend from the MPC, if Dato Latif is there, and his team, the DG of Malaysia Productivity Corporation. Thank you also for facilitating this talk. And we have received a number of questions, Dato, from our viewers. So if you don't mind, allow me to convey this question that we received. And first question is actually, this relates to, I think this is the recovery phase, yeah? And this is from Mariam Mondia. And the question is, how does Malaysia assist the SMEs in the digital world of doing business, especially those in rural areas? So Dato, if you don't mind taking up the query from the viewer, please.
Sorry. Can you repeat the question again, please?
The question is it relates to the SME and the assistance that what is Malaysia doing in supporting the SMEs, especially in this particular era of digital, and especially those SMEs in the rural areas. What are the specific efforts, initiatives relating to supporting the SMEs?
I think some of the speech that was given by the minister earlier has probably addressed the question that has been posed. But of course, with the recovery phase now that is been implemented, the government is slowly looking at how we can address some of these shortfalls that has been caused in terms of closing up the economy at one time where there was no activities. If you look at some of the measures that has been taken, the government has put up quite a number of stimulus measures in place. I think the Minister the Minister Azmin earlier has indicated quite a number of packages that has been given out to ensure that some of these SMEs do do make use of this funding so that it can be addressed. We're looking at some of the package, I think the 5 billion ringgit was also allocated by the central bank, which is Bank Negara Malaysia, to fund or to schemes and to support some of these SMEs. I hope that in a way answers some of the questions that was being posed.
Thank you. Yes, I think that yes, because that is in the economic, and I think the Minister Azmin already mentioned it also that. But still, I think it's good to just underline actually what the specific measures. And from our side, Dato, perhaps the question relates also about the border control and the entry, entry requirement. Malaysia, among others, is also well known as the tourism destination. It is also a destination for education. So what is happening here in this area of tourism? And later on, let's discuss tourism first, and then after that, we discuss about education.
Thank you. I think tourism is probably one of our biggest foreign earners. In fact, this year, in the year 2020, was designated as Visit Malaysia Year. But however, with the pandemic, it was decided that we no longer will have this 2020 as Visit Malaysia Year. Nonetheless, we understand that there's a need for us to reinvigorate the travel industry. There's a need for us to ensure that the tourism industry is restarted again. But I think for the time being, we are probably looking at not into the tourism industry, but those who are allowed to go into Malaysia are those like essential travelers, meaning to say that these are businessmen who have been operating in Malaysia. These are those what we call the Malaysia My Second Home pass holders, and also of course the travel for tourism would be at a later stage once everything is more under control. But for the time being, the tourism industry probably is only for the domestic, but international travel is still not in the radar yet.
Thank you, Dato. I think I can understand that, but that is also one area that is very actually prominent when we talk about Malaysia. Tourism is a very big feature of Malaysia as well. And other than international tourists, there are also a lot of international students that do. I know actually quite a number of people, quite large people from my network, my friends. Actually, they have schools the children are attending universities in Malaysia. And what is happening now with the situation of those international students? The what you call this, the semester, the term began virtually. What is the arrangement? What is your update on this relating to international students?
I think the students are still foreign students are still not allowed to come in yet. But some of the school terms, I think some of the students have been advised, that there's a need for them to wait until the entry ban for Malaysia is lifted. Entry ban, it does not cover those, as I mentioned earlier, those businessmen, those Malaysia My Second Home pass holder, but specifically students, tourism. Until a lift is banned, I think we are still wary of those travelers crossing the border into Malaysia. I think likewise, if you look at some of the countries, for example, in Japan here, we have many international students, not only from Malaysia, from the contact that I have, Malaysians in particular. We're looking at quite a number of them who are also stranded back in Malaysia, who went back to Malaysia before the pandemic, but when they want to come back, but the border was closed, so they have not been able to come back here as well. And many of these students have to miss class, or they were asked to to take the class online as well. So I think it's not only Malaysia that putting this in place, but even countries like Japan, for example, we have not been able to bring our students, even the new students. Not to say those who have been students here previously, but who are back home for the holidays prior to the closing down of the borders.
Thank you. That for a while you were off the camera.
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I thought you were running away from me, sir. No, Dato, let's continue. And I think there is a question from our friend Calvin, Calvin Chan. And
Correct.
this relates to the border movements. And the question is that he would like to know your comments on the possibility of resuming non-essential border movements, especially with immediate neighbors. Is there any prospect that we do this in this year? I understand that you mentioned that these are actually with permission, those with certain status, yes. But I think Calvin is referring to border movements for just perhaps non-essential. I don't know what his definition of non-essential. Perhaps it's leisure also, yeah. But what is the prospect? And if I understood also his question, that it will be perhaps with ASEAN countries, with Singapore, Indonesia, for example.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think there has been consideration now for the what we call a travel bubble. I think we are also looking at the possibility of having discussions with our neighbors. For example, I think there's been some of the countries that have been under considerations, like Singapore, next door neighbor. Then we are looking at probably Brunei as well, and some of the other countries that are probably deemed to have this reciprocity, that they want to look into how bilateral arrangement can be made in terms of crossing one or the other's border. Things are moving, discussions are ongoing, but I am not able to tell when that would be put in place, because it will depend on the authorities back home to see what are the criteria, whether these criteria have been met when discussions are completed at a later stage. Hopefully, when things are moving positively, like in the case of Malaysia, like I said earlier, we have 0 case yesterday, and countries can consider us positively to be included in the list for travel. And of course, I know some of the countries will probably be looking this through a reciprocity arrangement as well.
Thank you, Dato. I think everybody is waiting for that day when we are back to resume to our life that we knew before. But my own take is, I think it will be quite a while, even in the region, even in the context of Southeast Asia, in the context of ASEAN. In fact, for the time being, we are here. The international staff will not be able to also to travel. Well, of course, they may. Then they will be subject to quarantine, and I don't know when they are coming back. But that is the reality, and I think it will continue for some time. So let me invite you for two more. One is like your perhaps your experiences. What has been your most satisfying? That while you are being here in Japan, and that you help facilitating the situation, perhaps to the Malaysian community in Japan or in Tokyo specifically. And after that, I would like to ask you for concluding remarks. But perhaps let me invite you first for the first question, is that your experiences and that you feel that is a very satisfying and fulfilling role in terms of international cooperation, international collaboration, including with the host country, Japan, and also with other partners. Please, Dato.
Thank you. I think the first one, when I look back at the experience we have, of course, when we talk about diplomacy, when COVID-19 came into place, it is altogether a different territory. We are trading into something that's new. We had to put on a new hat, I guess. Not only a new hat, but many hats, in fact. And for the Malaysian community here, we have close to 7,000, 3,000 about 3,000 Malaysians. And there are so many who are stranded here, and so many who wanted to go home, but there are no flights. Some are running out of essential items. I think what is most satisfying is that the government, with the support of government back home, we were able to assist them to put to put back their smile on the face by looking at them rescheduling their flights, giving them some of the items which they need daily. I think this is something which makes your heart warm, to see them feel happy. But of course, with all this pandemic here, we see a lot of our nationalities. Well, it's not only limited to Malaysians, but other nationalities as well who were stuck. Sometimes, if you look back into the early part of the year, there were some in the Diamond Princess, there were some in cruise in Yokohama and in Hiroshima as well. All this needs coordination with the host government. And I must say that I'm quite pleased. I must be thankful to our host here, especially the Foreign Ministry. That is our point of contact, where they have been very helpful in terms of facilitating, in terms of providing us the information, in terms of connecting us with those companies. For example, the two cruise ship companies. They are able to provide us with almost immediate feedback. And this has helped us in terms of how we can strategize, in terms of how we can extract, put our citizens back on the flight for them to be back home in Malaysia and to be united with their families. I think these are some of the experience with. I think it's that will last quite a long time, because this is something that is unprecedented. And of course, as a group here, the ASEAN, we have the 10 ASEAN ambassadors, including Malaysia here. We are a very close group. We do a lot of consultations. We do a lot of information sharing. In fact, for this first half of the year, I was the chairman for the ASEAN group. While we did not meet physically, but we do meet virtually. So in a way, I'm also very thankful to my ASEAN colleagues who have been very informative, who have been able to exchange information. I think if you recall in some of the papers, the Japanese is also looking at having this travel arrangement with Vietnam and Thailand as well. So our colleagues from these two countries, will provide us with the information to see what are the criteria that can be incorporated into finally concluding a travel bubble between these countries. So these are some of the examples that we can emulate, that we can look at. And I'm sure this would also be beneficial for us when we negotiate with other countries as well, because this will probably be one of the criteria that is going to be incorporated in some of these arrangements. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and let me invite you for your last, perhaps, message, final message, and this got to do with looking forward. How, from now onward, what will be your advice, and what will you be, key points that you would like to share with the viewers from the perspective of the Malaysian experience, as well as your own as a top diplomat of Malaysia here in Tokyo.
Thank you very much, Secretary. I think this is a time of well, unprecedented times that we are looking at. And of course, when we are looking at post-COVID, there's, I think, the need for us to be sharing. One is, of course, to share information, exchanges of information, and the impact that it has on our economy. For example, there's a need for us to see how we can move toward together as a way forward. And we anticipate and hope that such information sharing on best practices, for example, more talks on the travel bubble, and may perhaps establish a stronger push for the economic recovery in the months to come. I understand that some of the countries like Japan, for example, have been looking at easing travel entry bans for countries like Australia, New Zealand, Thailand, even Vietnam. I think these are some of the things that we can also look at as far as Malaysia is concerned. We can look at how we can collaborate and how we can look at easing up so that both sides can continue to move forward the momentum of economic recovery by both countries. And of course, I think for me here, I'm looking forward to see how we can bring back some of the Malaysian students who are stuck in Malaysia.
Yes, Dato. I think you are freezing.
Back to Japan here.
Okay.
Even given the fact that Japan is still closing its border as well, and I think this would also be applicable to not only Malaysia but also to some of the countries that have business or interest in Japan here as well. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you so much, Dato. And as by way of concluding remarks from my side, from our side, I think what I would like to do is actually I would like to congratulate Malaysia, and I would like also to thank you again, Dato Ambassador. What we have seen is actually this is another APO member country, another member of ASEAN that has come to zero case. Yeah, and the senior minister have shared with us on the pronged financial and economic stimuli that the country has provided to dampen the impact of the economic impact to the country, to the businesses, to the people. But I think another very important point here that you have presented and shared with us is actually how the government, how the nation, how the people actually put a concerted efforts. Yeah, in terms of coordination, in terms of vision, in terms of the SOP, and that leads to success. So congratulations, Dato, and also congratulations to Malaysia. And thank you so much once again for sharing your time with us. And let's keep in touch, Dato.
Thank you very much.
To friends in the ACT. And
thank you very much.
We very much appreciate your time and sharing with the viewers. Thank you, Dato. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.